Hello, my name is Steve Lambert. I am the co-founder and artistic director of the Center for Artistic Activism, and we're an organization that helps people use their creativity and culture to impact power. And I first off just want to really thank everyone for joining us today. Seeing you all flood in just at this moment actually was like a really beautiful thing. And to know too that the enthusiasm that we've seen from folks about this idea and considering our speakers today, we just really appreciate it. So thank you for taking the time. Um, so we have we have several folks to talk to today. Andy from the Yes Men, who's going to be talking in a moment. He and I have worked together for over 15 years. Some of you may know we created a version of the New York Times that had only good news in it that came out just after the 2008 election that sort of presented a vision of the future. And I think we've worked with those ideas since. Mushon also I've known for many years, and someone whose feedback and ideas are really valuable. And when we were writing our book, we had Mushon take a look at an early draft just because the way he thinks is so valuable. Um, all of us have different ideas, of course, and we make different work, but we have a great amount of respect for each other. And that's why we wanted to do this with you, because we think A Land for All's ideas are, it's a vision that's worth considering. So I'm just going to quickly show you our agenda. We're doing this on a board that Mushon's going to talk a little bit about, but we'll give you an idea of what we're doing today and when, and we'll pass that along to you in a moment. But at the end, also, you'll see I'm going to provide some tools from the center about how you can think about what the next steps for you might be. And but first, I just wanted to say last week, I was on a call with some folks that are working on democracy in the United States and really, saving democracy in the United States. And what they're doing is like a lot of testing and surveys about what motivates people to action. And it's like a very scientific the way that they're approaching it. And it was really enlightening. So what they found was that when they talked to people about facts, about, the economy is doing well, and there are good policies that have been enacted and can be, this kind of message does okay with audiences. When they talk about fear, right? And they say, this is what's at stake, the loss of rights, the real threats, also, it does okay. But what works the best is talking about the facts in terms of a vision about what those policies mean, what those facts mean, and envisioning something positive that people feel like it's possible. And then talking about the threats to that vision. And that's what motivates people. And so I think if we want to talk about ending violence or, a way forward, having a real idea of where we want to go is critically important to motivate people. I've been able to work with groups all over the world and, look at movements throughout history. And I can tell you from what I've seen, the groups that have a vision of what they want, not just what they want to stop, what they don't want to do. Um, there's a lot we want to stop right now, but we also need to have a vision of what we want. And the groups that have that vision and have real steps about moving towards it are far more successful. Um, so let me see. Okay, I'm gonna just say that I am the host in a way and the moderator of this, and I am going to be watching the comments. There's a sort of way I'm going to be approaching this. This brings out a lot of strong feelings in folks, and I just want to acknowledge that. But also that there are plenty of places to argue on the internet, and the Center for Artistic Activism has never been one. We don't host debates, and all conversations should lead to like a mutual understanding, not an attempt to win an argument. Another thing is that there's no excuse for not being kind here. So if you find yourself in a place where you're maybe tempted to be unkind, take a break. Um, I don't think there's a reason for that, but if that's how you feel, just be ready. The other thing is the principle of charity, which is that we want to assume people are smart and well-meaning. And so we have folks on this panel that are not everyone speaks English as a first language. So it's okay to say something clumsily. What we want to do is interpret what people are saying in the best possible way, and that goes for everyone. Um, and then our starting point here too is like violence is terrible, and no one should have to live with violence, and everyone involved suffers. So if there's any of this that I've just said that you're like, but I'm not sure, you might be in the wrong meeting. And there are other places, other meetings that you can go to, and you can also host your own. But if I find that you are in the wrong meeting, I will help you get to the right meeting and the first step of that will be leaving this one. So if you have any issues with my moderation, I am the person that you can contact. And I'm going to give you an email address. It's right here. And you can let me know what you think. I promise I will read them all. From there, I'm going to pass it along to Mushon, who will get us started. And again, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you being here and being a part of this.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks, Andy, for doing this with us. Your support from the minute this horrible cycle has started has been really amazing. So I just posted a link on the Zoom chat, which I would appreciate if you can enter. This link is to a Miro board, which I will share now. So you should be able to see my Miro board. For those of you who have never seen a Miro board, it's like a map, so you can zoom in and zoom out. But the most important thing that you will do in this Miro board, just as a quick exercise to just get a feel of how you're feeling about the future and about your place in it. This is a kind of an exercise called Where You Stand, or also called the Pollack game, which is used in thinking about futures and our role in creating or preventing them. And you can see this chart, and what we will ask you to do, and it's written here, what we would ask you to do is to choose the comment tool it should be on your left. You should be able to see this comment tool and just place a comment here with somewhere on this board, and now try to think where do you feel, what do you feel about the next 5 years? So in the next 5 years, do you see the situation in Israel Palestine as getting better or worse? That better would be up, worse would be down. And do you feel empowered or disempowered to affect the future? So empowered would be here and disempowered would be here. So things are changing for the better, or things will only get worse. People's choices are what makes the difference, or mostly larger forces shape the world. So we can see somebody already left one. And we would like to see as many of them as possible. If you feel like you have a message that you want to add to that, you can, but we won't be able to read all of them, not now anyway. But as you can see, people are already placing these notes. So the participants here will be able to do that as well. Yeah. So that's you please continue doing that, and we are moving on. We will get back to this board later. Thank you.
That's me. I am already been introduced, but I am Andy Bichlbaum, one of the co-founders of the Yes Men, and it's so great to be here. As Steve said, Steve and I have been collaborating since our Good News New York Times in 2008, and it's awesome to be co-hosting with him. In 2015, a wonderful curator named Mayan Shelef invited me to Jerusalem to do a workshop against the occupation of the West Bank. And what I saw in Jerusalem when I went was incredibly depressing. I had spent a year in Jerusalem in college, getting to know Palestinians in my dorm, as well as Jews hiking across the West Bank from Jerusalem to Jericho, taking Arab buses to Nablus and elsewhere in the West Bank, spending time in an Arab village in the Galilee, etc. Now, in 2015, it was completely different, and all of those things would have been impossible. Walls everywhere. It was horrible. The workshop I led with the Israeli activists was good, but there was a palpable sense of futility and depression. They came up with some great ideas for projects to oppose the occupation, but none of them materialized. It was during that trip that I met Meron Rapaport, one of the two original founders of A Land for All, the other being Aouni al-Mashni, a Palestinian journalist and activist who had spent 12 years in Israeli jails. Meron explained to me the basic idea of A Land for All, which at the time was called Two States, One Homeland, and I was immediately taken. It was the only plan I'd ever heard that wouldn't lead to more of the same and even worse. It was beautiful and yet ordinary, the same stuff that's worked everywhere else there's been conflict, like Northern Ireland, Europe, etc. Most importantly, it was motivating to me personally to keep the future in mind for this region. Meron also told me it had no chance in hell of getting traction at the time, but that maybe there would be a day. I called Meron a couple of weeks after October 7th, and I asked him if maybe now that the absolute futility of Israeli policies had been demonstrated to anyone who would look, the vision of two states, one homeland might actually have a chance of succeeding. It obviously does. It's still the only vision I've seen that feels right, and it's infuriating to me that the American left hasn't yet really discovered it and still seems to be calling for a one-state solution that pretty much nobody on the ground actually wants, from the river to the sea, neither Palestinians nor Jews. What's most heartbreaking is that the American left could be so much more effective in pressuring Biden to demand a ceasefire now, if only we had a real vision, one that could actually stop the cycle of violence. This vision, A Land for All, is gaining traction among both Palestinians and Jewish Israelis on the ground. But to really succeed, it also has to gain traction abroad. The right wing everywhere has a vision, and the left needs one too. Now I'd like to pass it along to Dr. Rula Hardal, one of the two co-executive directors of A Land for All.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andy, for this powerful introduction. Actually, I wanted to start with what you said, and maybe I will emphasize that. But first of all, I would like to thank all of you for being here. I mean all the audience. And I would like to thank you again, Andy and Steve, for organizing this event. And again, I will thank my colleagues and friends, Yael, Mushon, and Adi. I would like to start with emphasizing what you said, Andy, that the strength of our political vision is that it comes from both people, from the Israelis and Palestinians themselves, from this place, from Israel, Palestine, people who was born here or were born here and continue to live here, and not again a solution to come from the American administration or from other Western countries or governments to solve the so-called Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And I'm saying the so-called because I do believe, all of us actually believe in Land for All, that the reality on the ground between the Israeli Jews and the Palestinians is much more complex and difficult than to label it as a conflict. It is a conflict. It is a national conflict between two national groups, where one of these groups has the right since 75 years, the most basic collective right for people of self-determination, and I mean the Israeli Jews, where the other group, the Palestinian people, still live under continuous negation of their collective right for self-determination, not only from the Israeli Jews, not only from the Israeli governments since more than 7 decades, but also from Western governments and mainly the U.S. administration and some important states in Europe. The second point of the strength of our political vision, that we start from the most basic fact that both people are not going to disappear or to decide freely to go out from this land, from Israel, Palestine. And I would like to start, I will present for you our political vision, what we mean, 2 states, 1 homeland, in details, as much as the time will enable me. But before that, the third point that we believe that it's important and fundamental strength of our political vision are the principles and the values that we agreed about through thousands of hours of discussions during more than 10 years of Palestinians and Israelis. And we believe that these principles and values are important to agree about between the Israeli Jews and the Palestinians before even speaking about a specific solution. Be it the 2-state solution, be it 2 states, 1 homeland, be it 2 states with confederation, or even 1 democratic state. And we are speaking about 5 important principles. The first one is the concept of the belonging to the homeland and the right of both people to belong to this homeland as their homeland. I know that for maybe a lot of people, it will sound strange because mostly the Palestinian people claim their indigeneity in this place, and they're belonging to this place, to Palestine as their homeland. And other people may say, but the Jewish people can live in other places, and this is an occupying power, settler, colonial. I agree with all of this, and unfortunately, I don't have, in this small introduction, I don't have the time to conceptualize the whole situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians politically and historically, but maybe we can refer to that in our questions and discussion. But we cannot ignore that the Israeli Jews and the Jews in general have also attachment and connection to Israel, Palestine, historically, and even theologically, if you want. It doesn't give them the right to claim this place to be only their homeland, as well as the Palestinians. And we suggest both people in our political vision to start doing a paradigm shift in their national narrative. Instead of fighting and struggling to whom belongs this land and who has the right for self-determination in this land, to start thinking about sharing the belonging to this homeland and sharing the rights and the future on this land. The second principle, and all of these 5 principles are intersected and interlocked together. We cannot think about one without thinking about the others. The second principle is equality. both individual and collective equality for both people. The third principle is the right for self-determination for both people, the Israeli Jews and the Palestinian people. The fourth principle is to start speaking also about recognition. And with this, we mean there is a need in this process of that transformative national awareness and national narrative of both people, and toward having a solution for this violence and conflict and Jewish supremacy in Israel-Palestine. We need also to acknowledge and to recognize that the Nakba is very important in shaping the present and the future, and also the national narrative and the individual narrative of all Palestinians, and to acknowledge what the Zionist movement did for the Palestinians since 48. And we are speaking about ongoing Nakba, and what is happening now since more than 130 days is a clear evidence that we need to speak about recognition before speaking about any solution. And there is a need also to speak about the collective Jewish memory and history of suffering because of the Holocaust in Europe. The fifth principle and the last one is actually reconciliation. After acknowledging all of these difficult histories and struggle between both groups and the ongoing conflict and violence, we need also to speak about reconciliation in the short term and for the long term, in order to have sustainable, viable future and peace for both people, and not only to speak about signing a kind of peace agreement, or even to speak only about peace. So the second part of my presentation is how we translate actually all of these principles and values into a practical political vision. Our political vision is based on, first of all, two sovereign, democratic, independent states for both Jewish Israelis and the Palestinians, between the river and the sea. The second element of our political vision, and acknowledging that we cannot and we don't agree about the whole concept of separation, not only because it's racist, it's not acceptable morally and ethically. We do believe that the reality that has developed on the ground between Palestinians and Israeli Jews since the establishment of the State of Israel and since the Nakba is a reality of interrelated people in terms of sharing the place, the resources, the natural resources, the roads, economy, environment, and many other issues that are already interrelated and interconnected. And that's why we think that it's not acceptable and it will be non-realistic to speak about separation between the two states. But rather than, we suggest a kind of shared model. You can call it confederation between the two independent states. You can call it union. And you can call it also building superstructure of legal and economic and political institutions, including, for example, a court for human rights after such a long, bloody conflict between the two people. These are actually the two main elements of the political vision. plus emphasizing some more aspects that we call them the deadlocks that we have in the classic two-state solution based on the Oslo Accords. And these are the movement of both people. We speak about free movement between the river and the sea for both people. We speak about a concept, a specific concept of residency and citizenship, which based on or which can deal with the problem of the settlements, of the Jewish Israeli settlements in the West Bank, and which enable us to deal with the right of return of the Palestinian people. We speak about also shared Jerusalem and a kind of open borders between the two states that can ensure actually the implementation of all of these aspects of our political vision. These, in very short words, the principles, the values, and the political vision. And you are welcome to expand your understanding, or you are welcome to ask any question when we start the discussion about all of these aspects of our political vision. Thank you.
And now, I guess we will hear from Yael Berda.
Thank you.
One of the board members of Alan.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for showing up on this call. We need people to show up. We really need everybody to show up for us. I just want to acknowledge that we are at this moment. It is a low point. It is I really would love to say it's the lowest point, but that might seem too optimistic. But I just want to acknowledge the ongoing war on Gaza. I want to acknowledge the tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. I want to acknowledge the Israelis killed and hurt on the 7th of October, the hostages that are still in Gaza, and the desperate feeling of many, many Israelis that do not agree with the government and its actions. And I want to tell you a little bit about that minority that we are part of. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that we are a minority of people fighting against the war right now. And while I think that a Land for All's vision is one of the most prominent ones circulating among those that are looking for a political solution within the anti-war movement, it's definitely something that we need to grow. And I want to talk a little bit about the kind of stifling silence in Israel right now. That first of all is the stifling of Palestinian citizens of Israel that cannot express their sadness or their anger or emotions around the war for fear of being seen as disloyal or as supporters of terrorism. And also, it's taken many months for Jewish Israelis to be out on the streets marching against the war, calling for a ceasefire. It's taken many months, but it's finally happening, and there are thousands of people that are coming out and saying, stop the war. There is no military solution. We need a different vision. And there's also something that I won't be able to get into, but for the past year, there has been the first massive protests in Israel's history, basically against the authoritarian policies of Netanyahu's government. And within that, there's been a small but significant bloc called the anti-occupation bloc that has been very active. And the anti-war coalition is working in a very interesting way. And the idea is, how do we speak about security and having a secure life? How do we talk about a vision of possibility when there is so much propaganda that is actually consistently telling people that there is no way out, that on the other side there are monsters? And so this is something that we're working on. And one of the things that I find most compelling in this idea of how do we bring people to imagine something different, it's first of all by acknowledging their fear, by acknowledging the fear that now has also become a reality. Since October 7th, for the first time in many, many decades, Israeli civilians were the ones who were on the vulnerable side. And in that sense, that what it means is that it's no longer a theoretical fear for people. It's a very real one. And while this moment brings so much pain and so much violence and so much inability to hear anyone else, or also people tell me this, and I'm sure most of us hear this over and over again: I don't have compassion. My heart is closed. So how do you get in there and you do something with that? And for me, one of the most inspiring things about A Land for All is the fact that we talk about everything. We see people for what it is that they need. And so we have to acknowledge that for Palestinians, all of Palestine, it's all of Palestine that is theirs. Haifa and Yafo and Akko, all of it. But for many Israelis, all of the land is also seen as as connected to them, as related to them. And that's the thing, I don't have to agree with that feeling. I can even be, like most of my life, fighting against the policies of settlement and occupation. But I can still acknowledge that connection. And within that acknowledgement, and I think that and I just want to connect it to the anti-war movement and what's happening now, there's this growing understanding that this is no longer something that we can leave to a bunch of men sitting around the table and drawing maps around. Really, because I mean, when you look at a lot of the problems that happened with Oslo, it had to do with the way these solutions were envisioned that had very little to do with how life is, with the everyday, with what is necessary economically, with the types of things that people need to think and feel. And right now, with having one goal of stopping the war, we find that the one thing that moves people to say, yes, I want to help you stop the war, we must have a ceasefire, we must have a hostage deal, is saying, what's going to happen afterwards? How can you even talk about having a solution? And by linking the two together, by not divorcing between stopping the war and having this vision, we're actually able to have more people say, yes, I acknowledge that despite the fact that this moment I am trapped in a terrible fear, I acknowledge that we need a plan. And through that, I think we're able to grow the people that are protesting the war, and that are trying to find creative ways to do that, and especially the creative ways to find voice that is shared, and especially trying to allow Palestinians to speak again in public after the shutdown of many months, which I think is a really important practice, and that's happening. And I also want to acknowledge some of our allies that have had really incredible feats on the ground. So Omdim Beyachad and is an organization that we find ourselves communicating a lot with, and finding support through and with them, and also many other movements in a coalition that it needs to grow, because it also is not heard. Palestinians don't know that we're trying to stop what's happening. People in the world don't know that we're trying to stop what's happening. And in that sense, part of having that imagination of what it is that we can be fighting for after the war is something that we need to have people resonate and talk about, critique, debate, but bring it out, and also know that we're here and we need the help to stop this.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rula and Yael. I think Mushon wanted to speak for a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll say a few words, and then we'll start the Q&A. I just wanted to add something specifically around the question of imagination and political imagination. Now Yael spoke about it from the Israeli side. Rula spoke about it a bit from the Palestinian side, but one of the things that I've been hearing again and again since this nightmare, I would say this part of the nightmare has begun, is that statement: "I don't see a future." People don't see a future, and you have to understand that from the Israeli perspective, what I see is that more than a painful memory, October 7th is a collective trauma, and it manifests as fundamentally hopeless vision of the world, and this insecurity breeds deep empathy for the hostages, for those who have been hurt by the war, but then that empathy has been weaponized. It has been weaponized to create this division of sides. Now, the images and the testimonies from October 7th and ever since make it hard to stay neutral. We're human, we care, we identify ourselves and our values in the suffering of the others. This empathy demands we take sides. Empathy works as a spotlight, and that has been shown in research. It shines light on the one and leaves the many in the dark. It is almost impossible to feel empathy for the many. Compassion, on the other hand, is a way to diffuse the empathy spotlight. While empathy is an exclusionary emotion, it makes us identify with the story of the one. Compassion can guide us to commit to the fate of the many. Empathy, like we've seen both in Israel, in Gaza, and in pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian solidarity movements, are looking to identify with the most worthy victim of the past, while compassion is a more future-forward emotion. It is also non-exclusionary. Now, we can look at Jewish supremacy and Muslim fundamentalism that may have led to October 7th, but it is the two-state solution in its separationist Oslo format that is responsible for everything that has happened since. What we see unfold is the zero-sum game approach to the future between the river and the sea. This zero-sum game manifests in either separation or extermination. It prevents the two people to see their futures in this land as connected and intertwined. Some argue that with so much death every day, this is not the right time to imagine. That imagination is a luxury of the privileged who are not dying in the hallways of bombed hospitals, starving in camps, or are abandoned in underground tunnels. But the truth is, right now, we do not have the luxury not to imagine. The warmongers on the right are led by a clear nationalist, fundamentalist vision of eternal holy war. Since the 90s, those who seek peace between the river and the sea have been led by a vision as well. That vision of a separation-based two-state solution. And that vision has failed. The Oslo process failed, but many are too afraid to give up on separation because they think that the only alternative would be eternal war. The vacuum left by those who refuse to imagine has been filled with our worst demons. War is the ultimate failure of the imagination, as the title of this event says. Many Israelis and Palestinians see October 7th as the loss of any hope for a peaceful future, rather than seeing it for what it really is, the greatest failure of Oslo's separation paradigm. That's why we see a turn to a violent nationalist right, both in the Jewish public and the Palestinian public. This is the price of not having a political vision, of not exercising political imagination. Both the fundamentalist visions of the right and the separationist visions of the Oslo Accords are based on the same zero-sum game, that one side's win is the other side's loss and vice versa. And on October 7th, that logic was activated to a degree of mutually assured destruction. This is the level of urgency that we see in the call for hope. This is not some stargazing that can wait for later. There's some games. This is a moment of great darkness. But to find our way in the dark, I would like to suggest Rebecca Solnit's framing in her book, Hope in the Dark. She talks about darkness as uncertainty. And here's a quote. I'll finish with this quote. Ideas at first considered outrageous or ridiculous or extreme gradually become what people think they've always believed. How the transformation happened is rarely remembered, in part because it's compromising. It recalls the mainstream when the mainstream was, say, rabidly homophobic or racist in a way that it no longer is. And it recalls that power comes from the shadows and the margins, that our hope is in the dark around the edges, not the limelight of center stage, our hope and often our power. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Mushon. Thank you, Rula and Yael and Steve. And now we'll take some questions. Already there have been a number. And I'd like to start with one for Rula. Essentially, it's who is we? Is this a US-based call? The Palestinian-Israel conflict needs to be primarily decided by them and not Americans. I think I know the answer, but if you...
No, I do have an answer. We at Alpha, at Land for All, actually, and we, the Palestinians and the Israeli Jews in Israel, Palestine. I do think that there is a gap between how people here experience themselves, their nationality, and the other, between people here and people abroad. And I'm speaking about, I'm not interested in all people abroad, but people who are engaged, who can be supporters, who can be alliances for us, and also people who live abroad who belong to both groups, to the Jewish group and to the Palestinian group. We have millions of Palestinians and Jews who live abroad and still connected to this place. And not only connected, they are interested in what's happening here and about the future of this place. But mainly when I say we, I refer to us in a land for all. And we are, maybe I forgot to say that, we are a joint cross-border political movement and organization. As you said in your introduction, Andy, that the idea started with the two main founders of this movement, Aoun El-Mashni and Miron Rapaport, and some other Palestinians and Israelis joined them during the years, the last maybe one decade, and they started to develop the whole idea. And we moved since or before 2 years to a kind of organization and a movement. The group started as, you know, as a non-formal initiative, but we have been institutionalized 2 years ago. And in 2023, we decided to move to a Palestinian-Israeli shared organizational form. And you know what? We moved to this new organizational form through long months. And our first joint board meeting of seven Israelis and 7 Palestinians, and Palestinians from Palestine, I mean Israeli Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, Palestinians from the West Bank, from Gaza, and from the diaspora. This joint board of our organization had its first meeting October 10th, 3 days after October 7th. And we still meet every 3-4 weeks as a joint board, and we still work together. And not only we still work together, we are growing here in Israel, Palestine, and also abroad, in Europe and in the States.
Thank you so much. The next question I'd like to ask Yael. There are several questions, but I'll sum them up. It's about the one-state solution and why it isn't better than 2 states, 1 homeland. And isn't the 2-state solution, this one, unrealistic?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I think it's a very important one. And so I supported the one-state solution for a while. I was a researcher, and I researched the permanent regime created by the Oslo Accord and what happened. You know, I was strongly opposed to Oslo separation and to the kind of, you know, crazy structures that materialized around it, and I was very much leaning towards the what is called the one-state solution, although many people imagine it very differently. There's not a vision called the one-state, actually. And one of the things I realized by really talking to many people and also being influenced by Aoun El-Mashni, who spent a very long term in prison with the core group of the founders of the movement, that Palestinians are not post-national. Palestinians need their own sovereign state. It is a necessity. After you've been denied self-determination for such a long time, it's kind of impossible to say, oh, wait a minute, you know, there's going to be this one thing, and you know, and everybody's going to be part of this one democratic state. And also realizing that Israelis were definitely not post-national. Not post-national. I could want to be, one can imagine a world of post-national and no borders, and in the 90s, this was like all the rage. To imagine that world, and everybody was thinking, it was like, oh, let's not talk about the state, that era is over. Wrong. So I'm an activist. I work on the ground, I talk to people, I listen to people, and what I was hearing was that people are not ready not to have their own collective right of self-determination, and that is an important part of finding a solution, is that you need to actually listen to what people can hear and want to hear, and are able to accept, with its limits, of course. I mean, yeah. And just to be brief, the other is, our solution realistic? So we have a member of our group, Elias Cohen, who says, what do you mean, is it unrealistic? Our life here, right now, what's happening? The violence, the separation, the incarceration, the colonial practices, that is crazy. The hatred is crazy. The extremism is crazy and unrealistic. So you want to call us unrealistic? We're the people that are looking at what is and finding the things that are most important to the two peoples: freedom of movement and self-determination for the Palestinians, security and self-determination for Israeli Jews, and also the fact that we see a very important bridge in the Palestinian citizens of Israel, or the Palestinians of 48, that were ousted from the Oslo process because they didn't have a place in it. And for us, they have a major place. Another aspect of this is, like, people say, how can you talk about the right of return? You can talk about it. We can think about how that's going to work out. How can you talk about settlers? We don't want to hear about settlers. Well, I mean, it's much crazier to just let things happen as they are and view that and see that the powerful I won't go into it. But just to say that the realistic thing is actually to be able to come up with something that people can accept, can live with, and will enable the growth of democratic societies, since we don't have them yet. To grow the democratic societies within this vision. And so we think it's more realistic than anything that our crazy reality is doing right now.
Thank you so much. Because you have to go in 5 minutes, I believe. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll send the next question to you as well. Well, you can choose. Why do we see importance in the international community? Why is this important for Americans to know about, the American left?
Oh, so I wrote in my little comment on the Miro board, SOS, we need help. We can't do this alone. You know something? Israel was also not founded alone. It was all about the international community. And it was all about the end of a colonial era, or kind of an end of a colonial era, and the end of the bloodiest war humanity experienced, and the Holocaust. And the story of Israel-Palestine is not only a local story, and we all know this. We all know this. Because also the diasporas, the histories of the Jewish diaspora, the history of the Palestinian, actually I just used the word diaspora, but it's something that I'm realizing that maybe doesn't resonate with everyone. So the Jews outside of Israel, some of them see themselves as related to Israel, some others don't. But definitely there are stakes there, no matter how one sees themselves connected. And definitely the Palestinian diaspora that has been ousted from its homeland. And so they are international and also the heart of the region, right? I mean, it's this situation affects global political economy. It affects the way other people see international relations. It affects policies towards minorities. It affects the security establishment, the weapons industry, international order. Do I need to go on? And yes, the American, because of the US support, Americans have a direct stake in doing everything they can to make life possible and make another world possible in Israel and Palestine.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to actually ask a similar question to Rula and Yael. Thank you so much. If you need to log off, we understand.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So the same sort of question that Yael just answered, Rula. I guess to change it a little bit, what is the role of the American left right now? And what can we imagine in this elections year? What can we, how can the progressive American left, the Palestine Solidarity Movement is so-called, that make a difference here? And what would you like to see?
Okay. Before I answer this question, and I do have something to add to what Yael said. I fully agree with her. But I will add another component. The USA is much involved in this war against the Palestinian people. The way the whole Western world was involved in the establishment of the state of Israel in 48 and causing the Nakba of the Palestinian people, and their responsibility for the suffering of the Palestinian people since then. It's not only the responsibility of the state of Israel. The direct responsibility, yeah, it's because of the occupation and the settler colonial nature of the Zionist project and the policies of the state of Israel with its all governments during the last 7-8 decades, but also the indirect policies of the United States and also some other Western countries. I cannot also exclude Germany from its role and the United Kingdoms and France, other countries, and the whole European involvement by transforming and solving the Jewish question in Europe before 100 years through creating a new problem in the Middle East, which is the Palestinian question or the Palestinian problem question. And this is the first reason. The second reason, I do believe that the progressive, the left Americans can influence the decision makers in the States. First of all, in stopping this war. The second, to put pressure on the Israeli government, not only to stop the war, but also to start dealing with the reality that there is another national group here, and this national group, it means the Palestinians are not going to give up. And we see since 48, the Palestinian people did not give up their right and their belonging to this place and their indigeneity, and they still struggle to have their most basic right of dignity and freedom and a sovereign state in different ways. The last one, unfortunately, we have seen in October 7th. So it's important for us to to emphasize your support because of your position as American citizens and because of the important role of the American administration in this situation and in this conflict. Either in its in during this time of war and escalation, but also in solving this situation. And before you move, Andy, to other question, please, I do have something to tell about the first point about the one state or two states. Like Yael, I started my political activism in Israel, Palestine, a few years ago with the One Democratic State campaign. And I do understand that the majority, I do understand, and I know that the majority of the Palestinian people in the diaspora and a lot of others, Jews and some other supporters, are engaged or at least support the one democratic state solution. And I was there because I spent some good years of my life abroad in Germany. And when I came back to Israel, Palestine, I decided to live in Palestine and to work in Palestinian universities. And after a couple of years, my whole conceptualization, it's not only because of my academic work, it's also because of this experience of living under the occupation. I live in Ramallah, and working directly with Palestinian people who live under the occupation. I do emphasize the point that Yael said, that the majority of the Palestinian people here on the ground, as well as the Jewish Israelis, is not a post-national mindset, and especially the Palestinian people. The second point, I don't see any solution. The two states, one homeland, two states confederation, or any kind of political imagination that can we agree about and think about, is the last stage or the end game. I do believe that we need a just and viable solution to go out from this situation that we are stuck in since many years. And I do believe that people have the right, after having the most basic right of self-determination, and especially the Palestinian people. And you know what? Every solution that we can speak about, it's a compromise for the Palestinian people and for me as a Palestinian. Even the one democratic state. But we cannot think about doing another justice for the Palestinian people by doing injustice for the Israeli Jews. Morally and ethically, I cannot think about that. And because I think that there is nothing, absolute, determined in our life and in history. People can later on, Israelis and Jews, I don't know, maybe the other generations can think later on, after they have this political vision of two states with union, with shared institutions, or with confederation. Maybe they will decide after 50 years or 100 years to live in one state. Or maybe they will separate into, I don't know, 4 states. Who knows?
Thank you so much. That's answers a lot of, that was actually going to be the next question I threw to you. What about this one state? And that's from your perspective. There's time for one more question. And either Rula or Mushon, for example, you could answer this one. Well, there are a lot of questions about the right of return and illegal settlements in this vision. I wanted to talk about the role of a realistic vision in the movement in the US and why it's important to have one that actually people on the ground in Palestine and Israel want. But I think that maybe we'll get to that anyway. So maybe, yeah, right of return, illegal settlements, what happens to either?
Rula, take it.
Okay. As I said before, the settlements are illegal. Okay, this is our starting point. On the other hand, we think that for some of these settlers, it will be hard to speak about leaving their settlements, but they will be asked to give up their privileges and supremacy and violence. And that's why we think, because of the experience of 2005, of the displacement of the settlers from the borders with Gaza Strip, we are very aware about the huge crisis that it caused to these people. But not only because of that. According to our concept, we believe that people would have the right, according to our political vision, to live where they want. There will be two kinds of citizenship: citizenship in Palestine and citizenship in Israel. And the settlers are citizens now in the state of Israel. They will be having that choice to move to Israel, to move back to Israel, or to stay in Palestine or in the state of Palestine, while accepting the rules and the regulations of the state of Palestine as residents, not as citizens. They will remain as citizens in the state of Israel, without having any privileges the way they have now, compared to the local citizens, the Palestinians. Of course, we speak about the private lands of the settlements should go back to the owners, the Palestinians, and we need to speak about regulations for compensation for the Palestinian people, etc. And the settlers who are involved in violence and terror attacks, they won't be allowed to be even residents in the state of Palestine. The right of return, shortly. First of all, we acknowledge that there is important, first of all, to acknowledge this right by the international community and by the Israeli Jews, that the Palestinian people have the right to return. The second point, I don't think that we can go into the details now, and the regulations are needed to regulate the whole thing, but we speak basically about the right of return to the state of Palestine of certain amount that should be negotiated between the two parties, and have the right to have citizenship and residency in Palestine, while we also speak about a certain amount of people who will have the right also to not only to come back or to return back to Palestine and to be citizens, but also to apply for residency in the state of Israel in order to go back to their origins, to go back to the places they were displaced from, like Haifa, like Led, and other places.
Thank you so much. I think we'll move to now there. And by the way, there are many links in the chat. If you want to learn more at your leisure, you can read it. You can send questions. But right now, this is an active meeting, and we want to lead to you and your action in support of this vision, if you believe in it, if you decide that this is something you have faith in, as we do. And so I'd like to pass it to Mushon and Steve, who have some tools for workshopping.
Yeah,
Steve?
so
Mushon.
I'll just I want to just add a few notes to kind of continue on the words of Rula and Yael into the question of the future. Like it looks like look, Israel is built on injustice, on huge injustice. Probably many other nations are built on different injustices, but Israel definitely is built on injustice and on layers of injustice. Both the injustice to the Palestinians in the Nakba and the injustices to the Jews through history, and many injustices. And in a way, I feel like many of the discussion are kind of sounds like make Palestine great again, make the Middle East great again. Like is there a moment in history that was just that we need to get back to, or are we moving forward with history towards a better place? And that is the attempt that we're trying to do. Yes, everything here is built on injustice, but we try to address it forward rather than backwards. And finally, to the question of two states versus one state, Palestinians have the right to find out who they are when they're not oppressed and occupied. And Israelis have the right to find out who they are when they are not oppressing and occupying. And that is enough of a reason for self-determination. This is an opportunity that we need to go through as two societies. And now, if I'll pass it to Steve, so we can start thinking of how does it translate to action? Because the point about the American left and the international community, look, you're already very, very much involved in this. This is your bombs. This is your diplomatic support. It's on you as well. Like stop thinking in borders. This is on all of us, and the political system here cannot support the transition that we need. So we need international bodies, and we need international support, and we need international solidarity.
Thanks. I just wanted to kind of reorient us to where we are, that we are going to go through some exercises that might help you think about how to move this forward. And both Mushon and I are going to do that, and then Rula is going to wrap it up for us. I know some people, you might have only had an hour to do this and stretched it a bit, and we appreciate that. And those of you that are just, again, I appreciate the enthusiasm and the great questions that we had and everything. So at the Center for Artistic Activism, we have a lot of tools to help people, because I can tell you firsthand, if you go into like a big activist organization or an advocacy organization and say, hey, you guys, you should be creative, they don't know what to do with that. It's too broad and too vague, right? And so one of the things that we talk about is how the creative process actually works. And Mushon was kind enough in that board to include a link to all this. So I gave some written material that you can use, but I'll just briefly say there's basically 4 steps to the creative process. The first one is observing and kind of collecting research. And that is part of what we've done over the last hour and 15 minutes, right? It's like I'm learning things. I'm sure you're all learning things, hopefully. And we take that in. And you do not expect yourself to have great ideas about how to move forward like immediately. That stuff kind of has to soak in for a while, right? What we do next is start combining ideas. So you're going to take ideas that hopefully came up in this meeting that maybe inspire you, that you noticed, and other things that inspire you, and start to put them together. After that, you've got some ideas, that maybe you want to play around with. Then you start to evaluate them. You don't want to evaluate them while you're creating them. It's stifling, right? And to be able to say like, oh, okay, I've got this event that's coming up with some friends, and I've got this idea. Do those things go together? There's an action being planned here, and I have these ideas that I think might be useful. How do those go together? How could I, make that happen? And then evaluate it, and then in the end, you do it. So again, I just want to take a little bit of the pressure off. There's a lot of new information here, and this is, especially with things that feel high stakes, sometimes there's a tendency to sort of back away, right? And say, this is a lot. I'm not sure I want to take this on. And that usually means you don't do much. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, just sit with it for a little bit and let it, and come back to it. And so we have these exercises for that. Beyond the creative process, one of the things that I've prepared for you is like a little thing about audiences. There are a lot of different kinds of people that we can talk to about this. And often when we'll go to groups, without thinking too much about it, we'll say, who's the audience for this? And they'll say, oh, the general public, right? And it's hard to be effective with an audience that is global, people of all ages, all over the world. So usually people mean something a little bit more specific. And I find that the more specific you can be, the more effective you can be. So we've got a little grid that can help you think about different kinds of audiences you might be able to reach, and who's most likely to act, who's least likely to act. You do not want to waste your time on people who are the least likely to act. Who has the most direct power to change the issue, who has the least direct power to change. And as you map that out, different audiences might become clear, like, actually, I think I could move this one. So that's an exercise that you can do. And then the third thing, which I'm going to spend a little bit more time with, is something we call think, feel, do, right? And so as you're considering this, or whatever it is that you in the end would like to see happen, that's the do. What do you want people to do? And I'll let Mushon, maybe I'm gonna put you on the spot here, but talk a little bit about that. Like, what would you like to see people do? But going back from there is, what do we want people to feel that's going to lead to that action? And what I found about A Land for All is that when I learned about it, it was like a sense of hope and relief that, like, oh, actually, there is something reasonable that might be able to happen. And so when I think about this, like, okay, how do I share that feeling? And then going from there backwards is like, what are the thoughts that lead to that? So we still need facts, we still need the information, but they all got to connect together. If you have the data, the information, and the feeling, but no action that people can take, it can lead to real powerlessness, right? If we try to connect, rationality and action, those don't generally fit together very well, but it's this theories of think, feel, and do. So Mushon's, I think, putting up this PDF that we've prepared for you, and it'll just walk you through some exercises that hopefully can lead to some ideas that you can take from this. I wish that I could tell you, like, here's what you can do. Here's a recipe. That is not how this works. Also, you're going to have probably other ideas. So among the 130 people here, someone is going to have an idea that I wouldn't have that might work. And so I want to leave that possibility. So that is available to download on the Miro board, and maybe we can put the direct link to the Dropbox link in the chat also. But like I said, it's just a little bit of structure to help you as you think through some of these ideas to move further. If you're like, still have questions, you want to collect a little bit more research and do a little bit more observation, there's links to some of the Land for All documents, and their publications, and how they've thought this through in the past. So, Mushon, am I missing anything, or are we ready to move on to you?
Yeah, well, Rula really has to go, so she has another meeting coming up. So, Rula, do you want to say a word before you
Yes, please.
say goodbye?
Yeah, I have to meet some ambassadors, some diplomats here in Jerusalem with my colleague, the Israeli co-founder, co-director of Land for All, and we just came back from 2 weeks tour in the States, where we met a lot of people and community and folks from the administration. We just came back a few days ago, and I have maybe few points to say them quickly. First of all, I would like to thank you all for listening to us. Our political vision is not exclusive, and we need people to interact with us and share their opinions, their thoughts, and we are open to do that anytime. We are open also to to hold another events if you would like to invite us to speak more and to engage more with each other. The second point, the situation is very difficult and is very horrifying in Israel-Palestine. And to be honest, there are days where I cannot breathe because of the existential fears that I have. We are still in the mid of the war. We don't see yet any light coming, especially from the Israeli side. And we don't see also serious pressure from the international community on the Israeli government to stop the war. Having said that, I will say another thing, and that's why we need your support. We have enough bad feelings between the Israeli Jews and the Palestinians here on the ground. We have enough hate and enough fears and enough polarization. We really would like to ask all of you to save this polarization from outside. We need supporters for both of us. Just try to think about being pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian. We can live here together, and we live together, and we had better years living here together. And we decided that as I started, nobody is going to go from both groups anywhere. And be pro equality, individual and collective equality, and self-determination and dignity, and no further Jewish supremacy and occupation and apartheid between the river and the sea for both people. This is my message. And thank you again. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rula.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. And please go talk to that diplomat. Please hang up and run. So I wanted to say very quickly, a couple of people asked, like, oh, is there going to be an opportunity to do things next? And absolutely there is. So Mushon, maybe you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So this is too short for us to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but we're halfway there, right? The next step that we envision is if you can use any of the things that you've learned in this conversation, then maybe there's a basis for a follow-up. Like we would love to do a follow-up with the Yes Men and the Center for Autistic Activism. But maybe the things that you've heard would help you start with questions and ideas and kind of initial sparks that you can leave here, and that would help us kind of form the next step. And the next step would be more about how we find opportunities for action. So that would be the most forward-leaning element of help that we need and we can give, right? The more collaborative part. But there are more things that you can do. Some of them are kind of more low-hanging fruits. So first of all, remember that point that I think all of us made today. Don't think about it as a zero-sum game. Those who are saying it's a zero-sum game have they have another agenda, and that agenda is not doing any good for Israelis and Palestinians. They might call themselves pro-Palestinian. They may call themselves pro-Israeli. They're not. Practice political imagination. Like think about the actions that you're already doing. Are they based on compassion? Are they based on the hope for a shared future? How can you translate that already, even before we meet again? Stay in touch with us. There's a bunch of links here for our website, for the updates group on WhatsApp that I really recommend. It's not, it's only a few days that you get like a segment that is really focused on the international community, looking on both what's happening right now and with the Land for All. You can follow more links through social media here. Contact us. If you think of people that we need to talk to, if it's specific people that you have a contact with that have a specific opportunity to make a change. If these are groups that need to work on this, especially groups that are engaged and the ones that would not, disappear the moment that a ceasefire appears, right? Like we will get a ceasefire at some point. It would not end there. We need the focus to continue. And for those of you who are able to support financially, obviously we need that as well. If you know people who can support us in extending our influence and then definitely try to get them involved. So these are just like a couple of directions that we thought are kind of off the bat, but we're mainly interested in the things that are happening here, the ideas that you've started to put here, and I'm happy to see some some small icons that I can recognize here.
Mushon, do you want to check in on where we are now with the?
Yeah. Finally, thanks for reminding me. Back to where you stand. So I personally was happy to see that many of you are leaning towards understanding that it's up to us. Even if the distribution is more leaning towards things are getting worse, and it's important to understand a point about this, the Polak game. This exercise, it differentiates between the axis of optimism and pessimism, and the axis of despair and hope. Most of you are leaning towards hope. I would hope that some of you may even feel more hopeful after this conversation. Maybe some would feel less optimistic or more optimistic. If any of you is interested in moving the position, that would be, let us know. I think we're out of time, so we won't do it right now. But you can leave it in the comment. Maybe add another comment that you would jump to the left or to the right or the up or down. We will read all of them, and we will read all of the suggestions over here. And we thank you so much for your engagement and for being with us today.
Yeah,
Jacques, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you all. I wanted to make one last point that this is all, there's a lot of amazing ideas here, and I think the future is what we're talking about, and we're talking about how peoples can get along and how the cycle of violence can finally stop and not lead to even worse things. But the first imperative is stopping the bombing right now, stopping the bombing of Gaza, getting a ceasefire, and this will help. And that is why we're talking also to people who, which includes many of us, who are just mortally appalled at what's going on right now. And we feel strongly that having a vision will improve the power of movements to affect their national leadership on this issue, on forcing, if need be, on demanding that Israel stop, or else, it's only movements in countries like the US can do that, can get their government to stop arming Israel, et cetera, or to really put demands on their own government. And having a vision for what comes next is going to help that. So right now, there isn't, in many of our opinions, a coherent vision on the American left, and there needs to be, and this is the one that I have personally found, and that I think a lot of us have that experience of. So unless there's more to say, there are many avenues for follow-up.
Let's let everyone get back to their diplomatic meetings that they have to go to.
Yes, we have them too, of course. So
with my son before he goes to sleep.
Yeah. Have that meeting. Everybody have.
Otherwise, I have a diplomatic crisis.
Yeah. Don't want more of that in the world. So thank you.
I want to thank Addie too for manning our Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Addie.
Yeah. And thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we'll send a follow-up email with some more info too. So
keep in touch with us.
yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.